You're listening to the A to Z of Human Performance live show weekdays at 13:30 GMT with Chris Lissaman and resident expert Jonna Sercombe. Please enjoy responsibly. Wow. Sunny day.
To the show.
Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here again. We've got just 3 shows left, Jonna. Today, Thursday, Friday. Great to have you with us. We're seeing out the week, seeing out our A to Z. We've gone all the way from A right through. We're taking on W today. Who is our theme, which is all about identity.
Who is who? And who are you?
Jonna, who are you?
Well, that's where we started. That was the first. So I had to introduce Emma and Steve to write the book.
You did, yeah.
And I had to say, Emma, this is Steve. Steve, this is Emma. And then we had to answer this important social question, without which society cannot function. Who is who? And who are you? And we kind of grappled, I think, a bit, as we all do. We grapple when it comes to our identity and who we are. Who exactly are we? And are we, is the person that society thinks we are who we are? Or are we someone else? What are the facets of identity that make us who we are? It's a real conundrum. And
it's really deep questions that you're mulling on there. And we're all about the high performers. What are the high performers doing when it comes to identity?
Well, I think they're very, very careful, Chris. We've talked a lot about metacognition, in effect, thinking about yourself or thinking about thinking. And the very wise and those that are in life for the long run are very careful, very protective even of their sense of themselves, of their sense of who they are in the world. And other people project onto us what they want us to be. And we can choose whether to accept those projections or whether to reject those projections. It's a very skillful and very psychologically deep job to do, to be the guardian of your identity, I think.
So the top performers are guarding that identity. So they're not letting anyone have expectations on them that they kind of have to fulfill. They know who they are. Basically.
They want to be the gatekeeper to who they are.
Yeah.
And they want to process and think through how they describe themselves and how that relates to what they do. Yeah, people say very succinctly, we're a human being, not a human doing, for example. So are we what we do? I mean, am I a facilitator and trainer? Well, if I were to reject that too much, I think then I've got societal kind of, it would seem absurd. Someone who's a teacher at school saying, but my identity is not a teacher, it's just what I do. Well, there's a bit of a paradox going on.
A lot of those will be kind of deep-rooted things that relate to our personality, our skills. Teacher, for example, it's more than a job there, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I once went actually to Milan on a business trip, and I was wandering around a beautiful cathedral, and I thought, I'm going to go and have a look inside this cathedral in a beautiful square of the Duomo. And I went in, and I've never been to a Catholic confession, but there was a little booth that you could go in and go and see the priest, and it had an electrical red light and an electrical green light on the top, and I saw this queue of people queuing up, and I thought they all look a bit depressed, but each person that came out, they looked like they'd been to the cash point and checked their bank balance, and it was a lot more than they thought. They looked quite happy, elated even. So I thought, do you know what? I'm a tourist in this town. I'm going to go in, and I went into the booth. And the father was there, and I found out subsequently you're not really supposed to go and do this unless you're actually Catholic, but I broke a few rules. Never mind. And he was there wasn't the screen, so I was just sat face to face with this very elderly Italian man, and he basically asked me what I did, and I said I did trainings for adults, for business people, and he said, this is not a job, this is not a vocation, this is a calling. And I was like, oh yeah, you're probably right. Actually, you don't do this for money just because it's a job. It's a teacher is definitely a vocation, but what we do traveling around the world and trying to help people be the best they can be is definitely a higher level than that even. So there's another way to think about identity and think about who we are. Is it what we do? Is it our vocation, our professional skills? Or is there something more above that that we're kind of called to do in the world?
Yeah, it comes back to the Ikigai topic, the
Yeah,
mission, the vocation, your purpose. Yeah.
But what happened in the conversation with me, Emma and Steve, is that we all agreed quite quickly that none of us wanted to be. Emma didn't want to be defined as a Paralympian. Steve didn't want to be defined as a former UK Special Forces operator or whatever else. And I don't like being referred to as an entrepreneur, mainly because I don't believe I am an entrepreneur, because nothing I've ever done is more creative than doing some consulting. So like these labels, people try and put them on us, and it's a shortcut, a heuristic. And I guess the big thing that the high performers are doing is they're choosing whether to accept those projections or not. And when they do accept them, they're also making sure that they kind of hold that lightly and realizing that it is a social construct. And we can see why that's really valuable, because obviously if your identity is that you are a director in a global real estate firm and you lose your job, if that was your identity, now you're no one. Now if that was where your esteem was coming from, your job title, your rank, the global company you work for, now you're no one. So for Emma, for example, if her identity is Olympic champion, and then she's injured or she's no longer racing, that is lost. And I do think on a very deep psychological level, it's important for us to gatekeep who we are. And it's even an everyday thing, Chris. When you become a parent, as I've been for a number of years now, people try and put labels onto that and say, my big bugbear, actually, people describe parenting as a job. It's like, parenting is not a job. You don't get paid. There's no holidays. There's no overtime. There's no time off. There's no appraisal.
No policies.
It's not a commercial enterprise. There's no P&L. It's not a charitable thing. It's like, parenting is not a job. So when people say to us, it's my 3 days. One of the dads, I do 3 days. 3 days where I professionally look after the children, and then I do 4 days work. It's like, those are not the same thing, because you're still a parent when you're at work. It's not a thing that switches off. So it's kind of also thinking about the kind of labels that you can attract and which ones you should embrace. Obviously, being a parent is something you should definitely embrace if you are a parent. But equally, that's not all of who you are. There's other sides to you as well.
Yeah, that's probably the key part of it, isn't it? That's your one label isn't exactly who you are, because it was very interesting reading in that chapter that you didn't want to be called an entrepreneur. Emma didn't want to be called either disabled or a gold medalist. And Steve again had his labels that he didn't want to be used. But yet, writing a book, you have to be identified. That your credentials, so that people will read the book. So there's this. Both are going on. You've got to be labeled, but you don't want to be labeled.
Exactly. I mean, imagine if I go and do a sales pitch for our company and say, by the way, I'm not the CEO. But you are the CEO. That's what you do. Yeah, no, I know. That's not a label I take on board. So, and it actually, it was provoking. I think partly why Steve was maybe reluctant to get involved was he didn't want to have any public profile. And that's a values choice that he'd made when he signed the Official Secrets Act and everything else. And, it was against his values to have a public profile. For Emma, it's like massively part of her values to have a public profile. I mean, if you can see the photo shoots she's done of her in a kayak, she looks phenomenal. It's like some of the best photography I've ever seen. But, and I also, I do love a bit of public profile. It's
about not taking on those labels as our own view on ourselves. So if I think I'm basically just my job, or I have to be my job, then it's going to be dangerous. Whereas other people, knowing my job is fine.
Absolutely. And I think, again, look in the media and see how toxic it can be when our esteem and our value is in what other people think of us and the labels they want to put onto us. If your value is in how many likes you've got on Instagram, how many followers you've got, how many shares of your channel, these are all things, even for a business, if your identity is in your sales result or your promotion, or you're putting yourself at huge risk that this transient thing, which could come and go, can have a big effect on how you feel about yourself and who you feel you are.
Yeah, it comes back to your own perceived sense of value and worth, which is quite a deep
Yeah,
concept.
very much. And it's also the declining of some of these labels are also a resilient strategy. So I know that I'm a good person. Do I need to be a successful person? If our business went through a crisis, if I was, let's say someone else, if I lost my job, if my identity is that I'm successful and something bad, a setback happens, and now I might feel unsuccessful, I lose my sense of myself. So, I don't want to have an identity as a successful person, but sometimes that's a helpful identity to assume in order to progress with projects that we're doing in life. Like author, let's put the label on. Everyone can be an author because you can. How quickly do you think, Chris, you could write? You know the secrets of Amazon. How quickly do you think you could get a #1 on Amazon?
How long would it take? How long does it have to be? It doesn't have to be that long, does it?
I know one person who wrote a book called "This Is a Picture of My Toe." Created a front cover, uploaded it into a very obscure part of the Amazon Kindle library, got 3 friends to buy it, and was an Amazon #1 bestseller inside an hour.
That's rapid, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're chasing labels, they're all out there, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And are there labels we should be going out for to try and achieve?
I don't know. What labels have you accumulated along the way? What's your identity?
I guess I've got identity as my job role. We've already talked about. So as a marketeer, as a designer, that's tying in my qualifications as well.
Yeah.
A creative, and
a leader in our business, a manager.
Yeah, manager, and then in home life, husband, son, obviously from birth.
Yeah.
These are all labels that we carry, aren't they?
Yeah. When my mum's father died, she said, "Oh, I've realised I'm an orphan now." Like this label of sonship even is temporary, right? Once parents pass on. So I mean, it's been really challenging. It's a great area to think. The question is, what's valuable for us and what's going to work for us in the long term, and what do we want to accept and decline from others? And we can go into also. There's obviously gender identity and sexual identity politics is massive at the moment, and it's all about labeling and people wanting to have or not have labels, make or not make labels, choose or not choose pronouns, or sexual behaviour as the main identifier. I don't think it really helps us in the end to make a big deal of labels. We've got to think about who we are inside, what we feel, who we feel we are, who we'd perhaps like to be. I mean, there's a point about aspiration as well.
Yep.
What does it mean to be a better person? What does it mean to be a higher version of ourselves? What do I aspire to as a human being? How can I head myself in that direction as a human being? And I think they're fundamentally it's a fundamentally valuable exercise to think, if I was to grow as a person in the world, what are the things I want to bring more of? What are the areas where I could contribute to others? This could also be part of how our identity grows, and part of the leadership development work we do often is helping people to break through mental barriers, breaking belief barriers about who they are, who they could be, how they could act. We know you could be a #1 author. Do you think you could be a Olympic champion, Chris?
I mean, that's difficult. That's going to take my age into account. It's going to take learning a sport well enough to qualify. That's a whole different kind of challenge. Probably not.
Yeah.
At this point.
But there are things that we could aspire to that aren't that are actually sort of results based. But there's also things we can aspire to on a values level. Like, I'd like to be a better and better father, a better and better husband, a better and better boss. I'd like to improve, and therefore it helps me to look at people who I think are outstanding that are ahead of me and think, what is it about that quality of person? What are they doing that I could perhaps learn from and try to assimilate that into who I am?
Yeah. And you mentioned the work we do with leaders all over the world. We also use psychometrics, which are labelers. They put you into a certain box. When are those helpful, and when aren't they helpful?
Well, it can help us. There's a journey, isn't there, to self-awareness, and you go from not really being that self-aware, a child, or perhaps even as an adult. Then you start to realise that we're different from other people and that there's individual differences. And I think somehow we then sort of like to get some words together to describe how we are. But as you know, if you just take very basic introversion, extroversion, I mean, does it really help? Does it help? it can be self-fulfilling prophecy. If I decide I'm an extrovert, if I decide I get my energy from other people, and I'm telling myself that is what I am, then surprise, surprise, I'm going to do the behaviours of that. So, the psychometric thing was really big. I don't know, 90s, 2010s. I think it's less.
Things like Myers-Briggs.
I think it's so common knowledge now that we're all different. I prefer to embrace individual diversity, try and understand the people that I work with, think about empathy. It helps to understand some of those different areas. But yeah, psychometrics have got a lesser place. In a very psychologically aware world, I think psychometrics have got a lesser place.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's somewhere where we can go to choose labels. And even something as kind of basic as a horoscope, people are saying, oh, I kind of need this label. I need this label so that I can find out who I am, discover my future, fulfill my destiny, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're latching on to labels.
Yeah. And I mean, in London, we latch onto postcodes in London, you know?
Yeah.
Whether it's in the posh bit of London where I live, it's all about housing postcodes. I mean, we are in W5 postcode, Ealing, amazing. But actually, because our postcode is different from our council, we're in Hounslow Council, not as good. Yeah. And people ask you where you live. And if you say we live in Ealing, they will even ask you like, all right, you know, which bit of Ealing?
It could go either way.
It's an identity. I mean, on the other side of London, East London, gangs are killing each other because they're on the wrong postcode. I mean, incredible. Just a label, you know?
Yeah. Or winning the postcode lottery.
Postcode lottery, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's complex, isn't it? But I guess it's that discussion about high performance is what we're trying to think about, and this process of whether you accept or decline what other people want to put onto you, whether you're going to choose your identity, whether you're going to choose to grow as a person.
Yep.
These are all, I think, important things. I met someone else in my travels. I once met the former Bishop of London, Richard Chartres, and I said to him like, "Hi there, Mr. Chartres. What do I call you, Bishop or Richard or what?" And he said, "Just call me Richard. It's fine." He said, "Although I am the Bishop of London, that isn't who I am. That is just a label that some people find it helpful to project onto me, and I have to hold that for them because that's helpful for them. But obviously, when I go home, it's not really. I'm just a human being like you." So I think the very top people realise, the highest performers in a lot of fields realise skin and bone, flesh and blood, and not dissimilar from anybody else.
And it's making me think of the 7 Habits, Stephen Covey's book, the iconic book about productivity and effective working. He talks about how he breaks down his tasks and his goals based on his labels, his identity, basically. So break it down as husband, as boss, and all of those things. He'll list those out and then set his tasks according to those. Do you think that's a helpful thing to do? Can it help us to set goals?
Very systematic, actually, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
I quite like it.
Have a pop quiz. What's your goals as a husband these days?
Keep my wife alive.
Through the pandemic.
That's always number one, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what's your goals as a manager?
I could go and get you my goals, actually. We could sit down and talk for hours. I've set some goals for the year.
And are the goals as a manager different from your role as a leader in the business? Yeah,
I think so. A manager and marketeer would definitely be separate categories. Yeah.
What about a leader within the business? I mean, there's
few leader within business. Yeah, you could riff off that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. We've got the language. We've got the beliefs. We've got value systems. I guess again, it was interesting for me in my career when my role as the leader of the business became bigger than my role as a trainer and facilitator. It caused me to have to realign how I thought about myself, because I needed to get better at the things it took to lead a company and not worry so much about things it took to run a workshop.
Right.
So I do think, I mean, again, thinking about where your income comes from, for example, can affect how you feel. If you're dependent on your job, then obviously that might be prioritized. I've met many people in my business life whose their salary is just a bonus. They've got other revenue streams, and therefore their identity actually isn't in that job. It's just a thing to do. You know, they might be very successful at it, and maybe because they haven't got the pressure to succeed in it, they're there on their own terms. So like even, you know, our financial situation, our career situation, if we think we're above or below where we should be, for example, very interesting. You know, are we ahead of the curve or behind?
Yeah, it's interesting to think that the way to get better at our job might not be to get better at what our job title is. essentially.
Yeah.
So as a facilitator or a consultant, it wasn't to get better at consulting or facilitating. It was the other leadership element of it and leading the business.
Yeah. So I mean, this is a huge topic, and you see also, you know, the high performers know how to leverage that identity when it's necessary. They know how to put themselves forward in the right way. They know, like, I have to know how to use my authority and job title and role and industry reputation and other things to do the things for my job, open doors and build networks and so on. But I think it's worth living a life that if all that was taken away, you'd still be okay.
Yeah,
and
it's to be comfortable.
who you are is not actually wrapped up in all of the other stuff that goes around.
Yeah,
you do. I mean, in elite sport, there's a lot of people who get quite depressed because I was listening to some of the golfers. In football, you might win every other match, for example. If you're a golfer, there's 100 golfers in the tournament. One person wins. You might win a couple of tournaments a year. I always wondered about tennis, actually, because tennis, like, there's 200 people in the draw, one champion. So most people on the World Tennis Tour, every single week, go out of the tournament. I mean, that's really tough, isn't it?
that is, yeah. And then you're labelled for going out and not winning.
So you've got your
most
rank.
people will.
Yeah, most people will go out. So I guess we've talked, haven't we, about poker, about choosing who to play against in poker. Try and play with people that are worse than you, and you'll win. I guess you could also think about the domain you want to operate in and whether you need to feel successful. Would you rather be like struggling to break through in a really challenging industry, or would you like to be working in an easy industry where you're able to be successful without too much effort? I was a brilliant toilet cleaner, Chris. I was an excellent.
Top of
your game. Those toilets, when I had a job cleaning toilets, they were so clean, and I would put myself in the hotel I worked in. I was pretty much close to the top of cleaning the toilets. I wasn't a bad bar manager either, but these were not necessarily that challenging environments.
Yeah, so, yeah, they're not as challenging as some of the environments you find yourself in now, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, and this is also like where the thing about identity is where do our feelings of our self-esteem come from, and some of it does come from external. Yeah, but really, the best feelings come from internal. Where we are satisfied with ourselves. I'll tell you another little story about that. But when I was running lots and lots of workshops, we always hand out these sheets at the end and say, how well have you done? And it took me for a long time. I used to open those and I'd be looking at them like they were crack cocaine. And if they were all 10, I'd be so high.
The score out of 10, right? Yeah.
Yeah, score out of 10 or whatever. If they were 10, I was so happy. And then if they were low, I was so depressed. Like, oh my gosh, I've done so badly. Yeah. And after about 3 years, I realized that the people writing those scores, some of them were very savvy people and would know whether I'd run a good training. Like, let's say they were the HR team or the L&D team. They know what good facilitation looked like. Sometimes they weren't very clever or skillful in our area. And
they're not experts.
They're not experts. So sometimes non-experts would give me a really high score and say that was brilliant. And I knew myself as an expert. I didn't mean going 5 out of 10, but I still did enough for them. Like, especially if I was ill, for example, I think, do you know what? I don't want to overdo it. I'm gonna cheat basically and give them a great experience that they'll rate me high, but not actually do that much magical work. And so I realised that my internal view of how I had worked should be more important than what other people thought of me. Yeah. And so sometimes I'd get a great score and say, yeah, that's all very nice, but I know I didn't do a good job here. And sometimes I'd get a low score and think, yeah, this is a really challenging group. I was ill. I was working.
They're not experts. They don't actually.
Or they don't know
how to score it effectively.
They were angry about something else about their company. If the people in the company are having a great time,
having a bad day, yeah.
If their company's struggling and they bring in a trainer to help them, it's a very different situation. So, thinking about what other people think and trying to also work out, let me be the guardian of whether I've done a good job today or not. Let me think about the context. Some of my greatest work was getting through programs by myself in very far-flung countries when I had caught a virus, something off the plane. I was ill. I couldn't not do the job, and I had to work out how to get through several days of challenging work. And I would obviously still need to achieve a level on the scores, and I'd get some good scores, and I'd know, do you know what, I aced that because I didn't actually have to.
The most you could give, basically.
That was the most efficiently I could do the job for them.
Yeah. And what about some habituators? What kind of tips can we take on to get better at honing and gatekeeping our identity?
I mean, it's a project that we can always work on, isn't it? Thinking about who we are and what role we play in the world. One of my things I think is to think about writing a list of what makes you who you are. At university, me and my housemates did a little collage to put on the doors of our rooms. It's so funny that we did that even then, but I can remember, feel the energy. That's what mine, that was cut out of a magazine, stuck on my door. I'd say that's something that we can all do. Think about what are the phrases that we would like to use to describe us, or what describes us. Another one, quite a lot deeper, I think, is sharing our true emotion. And in the workplace, that can be really helpful to have the right kind of confidences and share with people how we're actually doing, because our public mask can hide our real identity.
Yeah.
And, you know, finding the right mentors, if you want to grow as a person and become a bigger and more higher person who can mentor you, it might be a workplace figure, but I mean, I've got a friend, a mentor who's doing great work in the charitable sector. Someone who's encouraged me a lot over the years is a psychiatrist working with difficult children in difficult situations. Are there savvy people that you could have honest conversations with, but also who will call out the higher version of yourself, the better version of yourself, and say, you know, let's say you're complaining about a difficult person around you, and I say, like, be the higher person here, you know, stop moaning, think about how lucky you are and think about what you can do, and see this as a small, you know, wrinkle in life rather than a massive problem. So yeah, those people that can kind of challenge us, I think, and hold us accountable for being our highest selves are very, very helpful. And people that care about us, people that want us to feel good about ourselves and to be in a place of esteem. And there's loads of mental health professionals and other people, coaches that do that.
Yeah. So making a list, opening up about our emotions, and finding a mentor are all good things we can do.
What I should say, actually, get a coach. Available on the Interactive Workshops website. You can book it directly, £350 an hour. Is that?
Little plug.
No.
It's a good idea.
Working with coaches is extremely helpful to help us go on a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a great thing to do. We should wrap up the show. Thanks for joining me, Jonna, as ever.
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow we are on to X, which is Zenacious. It's going to be an interesting one, so join us for that. And we're here Friday as well.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris.
Play us out. See you tomorrow.